Well, it's been a prolific week for privilege. It all began on Saturday with a rousing Twitter debate about Anne Frank's white privilege. Now, apparently some leftists on the platform had been discussing the issue of inherent privileges allegedly enjoyed by victims of the Holocaust. And TMZ was the first outlet to pick up on this conversation and report on it with the breathless and only semi-coherent headline, Anne Frank, she had white privilege? Twitter debates. TMZ reports in their article, Twitter is yet again proving it's the worst for bulk bad takes, this time debating whether Anne Frank, who was hunted and killed by Nazis, had white privilege while alive. Then there's an emoji. I don't even know what that emoji is supposed to mean. They put it in the middle of like a news article, an emoji. Then they continue, you might have noticed that the late Holocaust victim was trending Saturday, but finding out why is disheartening. Some, it seems, have floated an argument that Frank benefited from white privilege in Nazi Germany, an argument that is rightly being shot down left and right. Unclear how this toxic discourse first started, but it seems to stem from a warped notion that Jews had the benefit of their skin color to go unnoticed in public, if only temporarily, during that bleak time in history, while POC historically haven't been able to do so. The theory is so twisted, and yet it's being defended by a select few on the Bird app. Now, as always, the first thing that jumps out at you anytime you read a TMZ article is that the film Idiocracy had it wildly wrong, because in the movie it took 500 years for the world to be so completely dumbed down and stupefied that a guy with an IQ of 95 is the greatest genius on the planet. By all appearances, we'll reach that point probably in another, not 500 years, maybe 500 minutes or so. As for the white privilege debate, TMZ may be scandalized by the very notion that a 16-year-old girl who died in the Holocaust could be accused of having, any kind of privilege at all. And it is an incredibly stupid idea, but it's also what leftism teaches. The doctrine of white privilege clearly states that white people possess inherent privileges on the basis of their race. No exceptions are made for this, or can be made, because any exception would unravel the whole idea of inherent privilege to begin with. If any individual white person can lose their privilege or never possess it to begin with, it would prove that privilege is not something automatically bestowed on everyone based on skin pigmentation. And if that's the case, then the white privilege creed is invalid, but the invalidation of the white privilege concept would mean the invalidation of the left's entire racial project, which they can't allow to happen. This means that all white people everywhere, in all situations, must be indicted for possessing inherent privilege, no matter how invisible that privilege may seem. Holocaust victims had privilege. The white child born in a single-wide trailer to a meth-addicted mother has privilege. The homeless white guy sleeping under the bridge has privilege. The white college applicant denied acceptance in favor of a less qualified minority applicant has privilege. If you are white, even if you can find no evidence in your life that you were ever given any advantage because of your race, and even if, on the contrary, there's actually evidence that you've been disadvantaged because of your race, you still have privilege. Privilege is unfalsifiable. There is nothing you can do to disprove it, and that includes being murdered in the Holocaust. If that sounds crazy to you, well, yes, exactly. You're getting the point. But there were more developments on the privilege front this weekend. A TikTok video went viral thanks to our friend Libs of TikTok, featuring an obese woman explaining the concept of thin privilege. Yes, privilege is not just assigned based on race, of course. There are many other forms of it, as TikTok user Gay DHD Goddess explains. Listen.
I have thin privilege.
What? But I'm so fat. I'm like a size 20, 22. How can I possibly have thin privilege? Because there are people who are fatter than me. When I go up on a plane, I might need a seatbelt extender. I might be uncomfortable. I may not feel good. People may say things to me. But I don't need to buy a second seat or risk getting kicked off the plane. That means that I have privilege compared to people who have that experience. You may not even need a seatbelt extender. If that's the case, then you have privilege compared to me. Somebody who is a model size may have privilege compared to you, but that doesn't mean you don't have any privilege. Almost all of us have some thin privilege. It's a spectrum and it goes by degrees.
Right. If you need a seatbelt extender, you still have thin privilege because at least you fit into one seat, she says. She actually says that. And if you need 2 seats, you still have thin privilege compared to somebody who takes up the whole row. And that person actually has thin privilege compared to somebody who needs to charter their own military cargo plane just to get around. And that person has thin privilege compared to somebody who can't fly at all and has to be tied down to an aircraft carrier like King Kong and dropped off on a mythical island filled with other prehistoric beasts. As long as there's at least one other life form theoretically more gargantuan than you have thin privilege, we're told. Now, you can kind of see the self-serving, I would really call it brilliance of the thin privilege spectrum concept, because all at once, it allows the fat person to claim victim status, competing for gold in the oppression Olympics, while at the same time rationalizing their gluttony by also claiming thin status in comparison to people fatter than themselves. So they can have their cake and eat it too, in their case, both figuratively and I'm sure literally. The magic of intersectional victimology all at once makes them both victims of fatness and beneficiaries of thinness. They can be both. It's the best of both worlds. Or at least it would be if the worlds actually existed, but they don't. Because as a great philosopher once said, I think it was Aristotle, he said, quoting, he said, "The mere existence of a fatter ass does not make your ass any less fat." Thinness, may have a relative component to it. For example, even after gorging myself on vacation for a week and a half, I am still thinner than, let's say, a humpback whale. But that doesn't really mean anything, because if you're a human being, your thinness or fatness is judged really not based on a comparison between yourself and other species or even between yourself and other people, but rather on how a human is supposed to be built. The problem with being fat is that if you are fat, you are carrying around more lard than your body was made to handle. And that would be the case even if you were the only person on earth. Even if you are morbidly obese and everyone else dies and you're the last person living, you would still be fat because your body wasn't made to handle all that fat. You're overtaxing your bones, your internal organs. You're killing yourself. That would be the case no matter what anybody else is doing. This is also why thin privilege makes no sense. No matter what the left has tried to do with the word, privilege is quite simply, as the dictionary still defines it, at least for now, a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. That's a privilege. The ability to fit onto an airplane seat is not a special right or advantage. The ability of my liver and lungs and other internal organs to function normally is not a special right or advantage. It's simply the standard human experience. It's what we're supposed to all experience. The obese person has inflicted upon himself special disadvantages. That doesn't make him a victim in any kind of societal sense of the term. The same can be applied to the concept of racial privilege. If you as a white person have never been explicitly granted special rights or advantages or immunities because of the color of your skin, then you don't have white privilege. Okay, if there is nothing that you're allowed to do because you're white that other non-white people aren't allowed to do, then you don't have white privilege. You might have other privileges. There are indeed privileges that come with, let's say, being wealthy. There are privileges that come with being extremely attractive. Not that I would know. This is especially the case if you're a woman. All kinds of privileges come with being an attractive woman. And most of all, there are privileges granted on the basis of ideology. You will enjoy the support and encouragement of every powerful institution in the country if you're on the left side of the ideological divide. That's the greatest privilege that our society has to offer. It's where true privilege can be found in many ways. So ironically, those complaining about their lack of privilege are doing so in order to gain privilege. By professing the doctrine of privilege, they're publicly aligning themselves with leftism and ensuring that they'll be granted all the privileges that come with it. And that is why white privilege and thin privilege and all the other fallacious concepts of privilege are today canceled. I know you're craving some more Matt Walsh Show content. Well, I have some great news for you. If you head over to dailywire.com and subscribe now, you can watch or listen to my full show. You can also listen to my podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'll see you there.